Okay, last lap. We're almost there. Almost there. We ended up with a little bit of the liturgy out of the Siddur, which is the prayers that are prayed at appointed times. And we saw in the Chanukah liturgy, again, that the point of Chanukah, they give right there, to express thanks and praise to your great name, which is consistent with the same thing that Sukkot does. Because remember, thematically, it's joined to Sukkot because there was a corpse that prevented the celebration of Sukkot. So it said, bear your holy arm and hasten the end for salvation. Salvation, Yeshua. Avenge the vengeance of your servant's blood upon the wicked nation, for the triumph is too long delayed for us, and there is no end to the days of evil. Repel the red one in the nethermost shadow, and establish for us the 7 shepherds. So along with the tradition of Chanukah, there are a couple of items here that we need to look at. The red one, which we know is Esau or Edom, you realize that in the Jewish mindset that Edom is Rome. And by extension, Christianity came to be viewed as an extension of Rome because the Roman Church was the first official church, or at least the non-Jewish affiliated church. So it's saying repel the red one. Within that liturgy, there's both a literal expectation that Rome will be extinguished because of their oppression. And they were actually polluting the temple precincts. You'd have to read a little bit of history to understand what was going on from time to time. But the Romans, for all practical purposes, did have control of the temple, and it was run by their pawns called Sadducees. And it said, establish for us the 7 shepherds. The 7 shepherds has a specific context in the prophets. But the 7 shepherds also has a context within the Feast of Sukkot. Do you know what they're called at Sukkot? Ever heard the word Ushpizin?
No.
No? Well, at Sukkot, according to the tradition, you're going to have a visit by the 7 Ushpizin, which is guests. You're going to have a guest in your sukkah who's going to come in and share a meal with you. I don't know, maybe this is where the Santa Claus eating cookies and milk thing came into play. I don't know. You never know what people will pick up. But at any rate, there are 7 patriarchs of Scripture, and sometimes there's variations in who those 7 shepherds are, but they would be, Moses actually would be in the middle. Can you imagine why? It's associated with Shavuot, the 4th feast, and at Shavuot it was Moses who received the Torah and passed it on to the people. But you'll have people lined up like Adam, Abraham, Isaac, Moses. I'm trying to think of the last list I looked at. Joseph, David, I'm missing one. Aaron. Aaron was one of them. But there's an 8th. There is an 8th. Oh, that's cool. What was the bam? The bam is going to be the red one and the 7 shepherds. That's our clue. Come on, Bam, move. There we go, bam, bam. Therefore, Yeshua says, when you see the abomination of desolation, they say he's screaming at us with all caps, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, And interestingly, it doesn't say let the hearer understand, it says let the reader understand. So he's driving us back to what section of Scripture? The book of Daniel. How many people start trying to figure out the book of Daniel before they ever read the Torah? Yeah, some people just like to terrorize themselves. It says, then those who are in Judea, there's a specific clue because we laid that foundation early on in terms of the Jews in Judea, must flee to the mountains, but pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath. So Yeshua's talking about something that has happened before. Throughout the history of Israel, other nations have come in. They have conquered Israel. They've taken the holy city, and they have desecrated the Temple Mount, and they have placed abominations on that Temple Mount. So when we talk about the abomination that causes desolation, when we talk about the Antichrist, don't get too bent out of shape. There's one in every generation. I mean, if you think you've spotted the Antichrist, don't pat yourself on the back too hard. They're pretty easy to spot.
Yeah.
And the abomination that causes desolation is even easier. Because in any given generation, if there's anything other than the temple functioning in holiness, look who's occupying it, and you know who the abomination that causes desolation is. It's not rocket science.
Right.
Just look up. What do you see on the Temple Mount?
Right.
In any generation, it's really easy to figure out. So Yeshua is saying, look at the past. Chanukah is associated with the particular time in history when Greece would have committed that abomination that caused desolation. But that had been done before, and the Romans would do it again. And it's been done again. So pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Shabbat. You think, well, really, why are you telling me that? Why would it matter what day of the week I run away? Well, it does matter. Because, before we get there, if you're in a synagogue, did Yeshua go to synagogue?
Yes.
As was his
Custom.
So it's not written in the Torah? Sorry. Another hour at Yom Kippur.
You're going to run out of hours.
Maybe I should just
You need a-
stay there till next
You
year.
need a second.
Yeah. But Yeshua speaks in context. Remember, that's one of our hermeneutical principles, along with first mention, progressive mention, complete mention. We also have to look at the historical, cultural, geographical, political context of anything that is said. And we know that Yeshua went to the synagogue every Shabbat, as was his custom, as was the custom of everybody listening to him at this point. And if you're in the synagogue, do you guys have an ark? Nope. Okay. If you've ever seen a Torah processional, what you see is that someone goes and they open up the ark, they move the parochet, the curtain, and they'll remove the Torah scroll. And then the Torah scroll is held up, and all the people say, "Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered, and let them who hate you flee from you.
Yes.
For from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord from Israel. Blessed be he who in his holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel." Now it's that simple. Who's running away?
Esau.
Esau, the
Yeah.
enemies of the Torah. You don't pray that those who are in the synagogue run away when the Torah goes forth. You pray that the adversary of the Torah flees
Yes.
when it goes forth. There's context. But that leaves the winter question, right? We're going to have to deal with the winter question. But just to identify for you the red one, he's called Admon in Hebrew, which goes back to Edom. The Hebrew word for red is Adom. You hear Adam, because he was taken out of the red earth. It doesn't matter what color you are, you're red. You can be anything you want to be as long as you're red. Sound okay? I don't want to be red now. It's a good thing. It's a good thing because the tabernacle told you that story. There were 3 primary colors. There was red, there was blue, and there was purple. Blue represents heaven, red represents earth, and what is purple? That's what happens when you put them together. And in fact, the color purple is not truly a mixture. It's 100% red and it's 100% blue. Does that tell you Messiah's nature? So it's okay to be red. He's given us a picture of our own future in those colors. So we started out as red earth, and then he breathes his blue Shemaim, his blue heaven into us, and we become purple people. But we're still 100% red and 100% blue. So the descendants of Esau are Edom. They are seen in the tradition as the ones who brought the current exile. In other words, to this day, it's because of the Romans that the Jews have been scattered throughout the earth. So he is Rome associated with Edom. And then, like I say, by extension, the Roman Christianity is also seen as the red one. And I think, of course, the persecutions would have played a great role in that identification.
Sure.
I don't know that this generation really has that baggage as much as previous ones, but it's still in the liturgy.
Yeah.
And so it says the seven shepherds of Micah 5:4 will conquer Israel's oppressors. And I'm taking that out of the Complete Art Scroll Siddur. I actually gave you a page number so you could reference it. So Micah 5:4 talks about 7 shepherds that are going to conquer Israel's oppressors. Does that sound messianic in flavor? Yes. So with Chanukah, what we have is basically a Sheni, a second Sukkot. We know that Sukkot is kicked off at the Feast of Trumpets. Those decrees that have been made at the Feast of Trumpets, you have 10 terrible days for the process of repentance or return, so that you can return to the house at Sukkot. And you can hear the seeds of that in the dedication of the house, in the first mention of Chanukah. So you have a feast season right there where the themes, they have different themes, but they're all the same theme. It's to get you back in the house. And in fact, it's a dedicated house. So the expectation with Chanukah is that thematically it's going to have something to do with Sukkot and Yom Kippur and the Feast of Trumpets. Those themes should carry over into Chanukah if it is a Sheni. Because it doesn't mean that it's something brand new we invented. It means that something went before that we are commemorating and that we will not allow to pass away, but we keep it in our present memory. See, when the Father brings something to his remembrance, does that mean that he's forgetful? It means that he's going to take this event from the past and bring it into our present.
That's right.
Not his, because he is ever present. It's we who need remembrance, so that this event, we can see that it has a bearing on something that's about to happen now. It's the same thing with Hanukkah. Something that's happened before is going to happen again. So it's the enemy that's scattered when the Torah goes forth on Shabbat, and the red ones who were scattered in the winter, according to the tradition. That's why we spent so much time on tradition last night. So when you're reading that in context, you realize that they're kind of talking about the same thing, but not exactly. Because the seventh day, the Shabbat, it happens every week. We want the enemy to be scattered every week when the Torah goes forth. But the red one is very specific. There's an expectation that the red one will be put to flight in battle in winter. And Chanukah commemorates that expectation. So with the 7 shepherds, what do we have? We have Shabbat, but we also have the 7 Moedim, because the Ushpizin, who visit you during Sukkot, their job is to sit down with each family in the Sukkah. They're going to come and dine. Remember that message to Laodikia, which lines up with Sukkot? It says, I will come and dine with him. They're going to sit down with you and they're going to say, how well have you dwelled in Sukkot over the last year? And you're saying, hey, wait a minute, I just went through Yom Kippur. I'm not supposed to answer this question again. But you are. Because if Sukkot is a temporary dwelling, isn't there something permanent coming?
Yep.
Exactly. So we thought we were good after Yom Kippur, the gates closed, and oh goodness, I'm so glad I'm inside the city when the gates closed, right? But he's saying, you know, we still have to have a conversation if you're going to be in this city with me. And so these 7 shepherds, starting with Adam, each night they will come, and each one of them represents something a little bit different, but it's definitely the characteristics that you would want to cultivate if you were walking in the Torah, like the hospitality of Abraham. Now, some people don't like this analogy because they think that it's rooted in Kabbalism from the medieval period. But you have to ask yourself, where did they get it? Sometimes because something is associated with someone, we fail to ask, where did they get that before they messed it up? Right? Let's say any symbol, any object known to man has at some point been appropriated by paganism or the occult. So if you're trying to find a symbol or an object that's completely pure and clean, good luck. Let me know how that goes. Right? You have to keep digging back to the seed and say, what's the seed of it before so-and-so messed it up? So just because the Kabbalists do teach about the 7 shepherds doesn't mean that they originated, because it originated in Micah. Okay? So with the Ushpizin, with these guests, these shepherds, these are shepherds of Israel. And they rose up at important times in the history of Israel for deliverance, for salvation, for sanctification, for redemption. They each had some function. And there are some Middle Eastern texts that also list 7 shepherdesses, which is interesting, because the first mention of shepherd is not shepherd, it's shepherdess. The ladies just went,
Shepherdess.
shepherdess.
Wow.
She was a shepherdess. So we've got winter associated with Hanukkah. Now there's one other place that I know of where winter is mentioned in the New Testament. And it's in John. At that time, the Feast of the Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter. And Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. Who dedicated that temple originally? Solomon. Who laid the foundation of that temple originally? Solomon. So Yeshua is walking in Solomon's portico. And it says the Jews. Do you think that is a significant noun? Knowing everything that you know now in the context of the Jews, with the feasts and so forth. So do you think of all people, the Jews would understand what the messianic expectation of Chanukah was?
Yeah.
All right, so this is significant. The Jews then gathered around him and were saying to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." How many of you know Yeshua could be coy?
Yeah.
I was like, quit telling me parables, tell me the answer. Right? So we've got Solomon dedicating this temple, and we have the Jews wanting to know if he's the Christ. Why would they have the expectation that the Messiah would show up in the temple at the Feast of Dedication? Has anybody ever asked you that question?
No.
Well, it's time. What they want to know, according to their messianic expectation, is whether Yeshua at that time, was he ever asked that question before? Will you at this time restore the kingdom?
Oh, yeah. His apostles asked.
So this is not completely out of context. They're all looking for Messiah. And so they want to know, are you the red one? Are you going to get rid of these Romans who are polluting our worship, who are polluting our land? Are you going to get rid of this red one, this abomination that causes desolation? And again, read the history and you can see part of what the Romans were doing at that time, even before it got to the point where they made a pagan temple out of the Temple Mount. So like Peter, the Jews are expecting a total deliverance and restoration of the kingdom in their generation, and they believe Messiah the shepherd must do this. They are expecting him to show up in the temple at Chanukah. And they're saying, if you're the one, you better tell us. And the question is, did he tell them? And I want you to understand, too, to this day, the deal breaker for Orthodox Jews and Yeshua really has to do with this right here. Because if it's Messiah, then he has to restore the kingdom. You have to get in their mind and get their mindset to understand why it's so difficult for them to wrap their minds around Yeshua as the Messiah when their focus is on the deliverance from the red one, and our focus is on salvation. But there's a reason for that. There's a reason our focus is different. And Paul said that this blindness had to happen to Israel so that the fullness of the Gentiles could come in. It was necessary. It was part of it. And so the reason to this day that they're having trouble with Yeshua is this very question. Why didn't he restore the kingdom of Israel? Where is everybody? Most importantly, where are the nations? They understand that that's part of it. And that's actually why within Orthodox Judaism today, we're starting to get some attention. Serious attention.
Yep, the Messianics, yep.
Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, these testify of me. But you do not believe me because you are not of my sheep. Who are they looking for? The 7 shepherds? No, but there's 8. 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. Can you see why they would expect him at Chanukah, which is celebrated for 8 days? He says, you're not of my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give eternal life to them, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one. And then they just went to pieces. Blasphemy!
Yeah, they did.
They asked him.
Did he answer their question?
Yes.
How did he identify himself? I am the shepherd.
Yeah.
If you're looking for the 7 shepherds and the 8 leaders of men, here I am. But you don't believe me because you're not one of my sheep.
Yeah. Ouch.
That was pretty tough. No wonder they got angry.
Yeah.
So Chanukah is our Sukkot Sheni because of that Roman defilement of the holy spaces. These Jews are looking for the 7 shepherds, the 8 leaders of men. And so what Yeshua is saying is, if I'm the shepherd, it's only my sheep who are going to know my voice. Right? There was a lot going on in the first century that was not listening to the voice. There was a political priesthood, the Sadducees. How in the world is a political priesthood who doesn't believe in the resurrection of the dead ever going to hear his voice?
Not.
It's not. You got the school of Shammai that's saying the Gentile has no part in the world to come. How in the world are they going to hear his voice? Especially when he starts kicking over their marketplace tables and telling them they shouldn't be taking the money of the Gentiles and not making their sacrifices. He's written, my Father's house is a house of prayer for all nations. And it's connected with this. Now, this is a very long quote, but I wanted you to have the entire context on this one. All right? It says, and think of all the themes we've talked about today. Now muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops. They have laid siege against us. With a rod they will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. War. And a judge of Israel who was smitten on the cheek. Do we know who that was? Yeshua. But as for you, Bethlehem.
What the girl?
And I haven't even been drinking.
Would you like some?
Bethlehem. Well, it's easier in Hebrew, that's it. But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephratah. And interestingly, a couple of years ago, no, last year. Yeah. No, before last. I'm getting old. My friend and I were able to attend a synagogue service in Ephrat. Ephratah is Bethlehem, but it's the non-Christmas side. We were able to go to the synagogue of Rabbi Riskin. If you've ever seen his videos or his articles on Arut Sheva, he's under fire right now because he actually ordained women as halachic advisors. He didn't call them rabbis, but the title is the equivalent of. But he said it's time. The time of Messiah is upon us, and it is time that we restore the shepherdesses of Israel.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does that mean now?
So
Means we got the
with the synagogue, we were able to worship with a group of Jews that are very open to us. They said, you know, we've actually talked with a group. Once they saw how we engaged, we actually spent the weekend with an Orthodox family there in Ephrat, and then they took us to the synagogue Friday evening.
Wow.
And they were having trouble because my friend and I, we knew how to act in their house. We knew the Jewish law. We didn't try to touch the wine bottle after it was opened. We didn't flip lights on and off. We didn't tear toilet paper. I'll tell you about that one later if you don't understand. we were able to keep up with the blessings in Hebrew. We didn't talk between hand washing and the challah blessing. We knew their rules in their house, and we respected their rules in their house. And we went down to the synagogue, and they said, you don't have to go if you don't want to. It's all in Hebrew. And we said, okay. And we were able to follow in the Hebrew Siddur. We knew when to sit down. We knew when to stand up. We knew when to go forward. We knew when to go backward. We knew when to say Amen. And they think we're Jewish. The family that we're with knows we're not, at least not halachically. And so they're assuming. And so we get back to the house and they start asking questions. Who are you people? And they were so interested, instead of going back to synagogue on Saturday, they sent the boys, and we sat around and we talked, and they questioned and questioned and questioned and questioned and questioned and questioned. And how many of them are there, and where are they? And they're keeping Shabbat, and they're eating kosher. They know the Moedim. Well, and now where are they again? They were astounded.
Wow.
And so that led to another meeting, and we ended up having over 2 hours of interview, them interviewing us, with Rabbi Cardozo's think tank in Jerusalem. If you know who Rabbi Cardozo is, very famous rabbi, but he has a heart for the Gentiles. And they were so welcoming. We figured we were going to get shredded, beat up, mowed down with this Yeshua thing. They didn't even bring him up. What was important to them is that we were keeping Torah. I was the dummy that, because they're like, well, you're already keeping the Torah. Why don't you just convert? What's the problem? So, well, there is that Yeshua thing. But to them, that was just like, yeah, but you're keeping Torah. See, that's a sign to them. Because it didn't add up with everything they knew about the Red One and Christianity and the Roman Church. So they know there's something else afoot.
Yes.
And they decided that this must be what Zechariah prophesied about. And so we've maintained contact there. But that was a divine appointment for us in Ephrat, to make that association there. But it says, too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you, one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel. There's a lot of prophecy going on right there, guys. I wish we had time to chase it down. And he will arise and shepherd, this is the 8th shepherd, his flock in the strength of the Lord and the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will remain, because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. You realize he's prophesying of 2 different time periods. There's the time he will be smitten on the cheek. He will not be recognized by his brethren. But he will arise and shepherd his sheep in the strength of the Lord. And then they will remain. Because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. He will be the shepherd Messiah that they were looking for, that they were asking him about in the temple at the Feast of Dedication. This one will be our peace. When the Assyrian invades our land, who deported the 10 tribes? For the most part, Assyria. Are you starting to see the connection with Chanukah now? When the Assyrian invades our land, when he tramples on our citadels, then we will raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. So is it 7 or is it 8?
Yes.
Yes. 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. And which one of those is our peace?
Yeshua.
Messiah Yeshua. When he will finally reveal himself to his brothers as that suffering servant, but now he will say, I am that shepherd, and I will take care of this red problem. They will shepherd the land of Assyria with the sword, the land of Nimrod at its entrances, and he will deliver us from the Assyrian when he attacks our land and when he tramples our territory. Then the remnant of Jacob will be among many peoples, like dew from the Lord, like showers on vegetation, which do not wait for man or delay for the sons of men. What is he saying? He's saying that the remnant of Jacob is going to be scattered among the nations. Yep. See, that was the trouble. Will you at this time restore the kingdom? They're saying, we need to see the nations. That's part of it. Sukkot is called the Feast of the Nations. Chanukah is a Sukkot Sheni. Where are the nations? Well, we're starting to pop up on the radar. The Assyrians were the ones responsible for the greatest deportation. Babylon gave them back.
Yeah.
The Assyrians scattered them. The remnant of Jacob will be among many peoples. That's Micah 5, 1 through 8. And that explains Yeshua's answers. The Jews expected the Messiah to deliver them from Rome like Judah Maccabee had delivered them from Greece. Yeshua could not do it at that time because it did not allow for the gathering of all the sheep. He did, however, lay the foundation of fulfilling the prophecies of Haggai, Zechariah, and Micha to collect the sheep among the nations. He says, I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep, which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. You realize the 2 flocks are starting to get together right now. Yeshua could not do it at that time because there was still part of that prophecy that had to be fulfilled. It wasn't just delivering the Jews from the red one. He had to deliver the nations, and those Israelite souls lost among the nations, he had to become their shepherd and call them back into the fold. So, aren't you glad that the Jews grew Chanukah out of the seed of Sukkot? Out of the seed of Pesach Sheni. Because you realize at Pesach it was a mixed multitude that went up with the Israelites. You had a seed that far back. And aren't you glad that Yeshua will take care of the abomination that causes desolation?
Yes.
And part of that conquering of the abomination includes our return. See, at Chanukah, and you don't have to pronounce it like that. I think he'll do with Hanukkah. Just know it's a pronunciation test, like Sibboleth. If you can't say Chanukah, then you can't go back. So practice your Chanukah. It's wintertime, you'll do fine. And it is winter. But that's part of the battle plan. Again, Sukkot requires an 8th day. So that was the question. Is it 7 or is it 8? And you can see in the book of Haggai that prophecy of Chanukah, it was juxtaposed with symbols of the 7th day, or is it the 8th day? Celebration of Sukkot. So we're going to look at Leviticus 23 briefly, and then when you get home, you can look at it in detail. I'm going to point out to you some structural, not problems, but it takes us back to words in the hood. Okay? How he set up the text on very valuable real estate, when really he only had to tell us about Sukkot one time. Right? That would have been sufficient if he had simply described, okay, it's a 7-day feast, but I want you to add one more. Period, the end, have a good time at Sukkot. But he didn't do that. He gave us lots of acreage to consider about Sukkot. He describes the 8th day first. It says, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, on the 15th of the 7th month is a feast of booths, Sukkot, for 7 days to the Lord. On the first day is a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work of any kind. For 7 days you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall have a holy convocation and present an offering by fire to the Lord. It is an assembly. You shall do no laborious work. Right? So, by virtue of saying 8th, we understand that it is part of the 7, correct? Yes, there would be no point in numbering it 8 if you weren't taking into account 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If it was all by itself, it would be 1. Okay, that marker in verses 37 through 38 is providing a summary. It's implying that everything preceding it is summing up the Moedim, just like 23, 1 through 2 summarizes what follows. They're bookends. Go back and find those bookends in the text when you have time. Now, these are the appointed times of the Lord, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations, to present offerings by fire to the Lord, burnt offerings and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings. Each day's matter on its own day, besides those of the Sabbaths of the Lord, and besides your gifts, and besides all your votive and free will offerings, which you give to the Lord. That's going to include the Thanksgiving. But inexplicably, the text goes on to describe Sukkot without the 8th day. Right? When we go through it again, it's talking about it again on exactly the 15th day of the 7th month. When you have gathered in the crops of the land, you shall celebrate the feast of the Lord for 7 days, with a rest on the first day and a rest on the 8th day. You're thinking, now wait a minute, didn't it say a rest on the 7th day? What is he doing here? Now on the first day you shall take for yourselves the foliage of beautiful trees, palm branches, and boughs of leafy trees, willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. All right? Now, look at this account. I just told you about 8. You shall thus celebrate it as a feast of the Lord. See what I mean about he's taking up a lot of acreage here? Count how many times the redemption of the firstborn is mentioned at Passover. That one goes on and on. You shall thus celebrate it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall live in booths for 7 days. All the native born in Israel shall live in booths, so that your generations may know that I had the sons of Israel live in booths when I brought them out from the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Where's the 8th day? See here, he's talking about the native born being assigned to that 7 days. But remember, the 8th shepherd is bringing the nations back. See the fusing of the themes there? The Sukkot of the nations, the Feast of the Nations. So, what are we supposed to see about this? Well, in the Jewish terminology, Moses is the prophecy, and the prophets are his legs.
Yep.
In other words, the Torah itself is the prophecy. The prophets are prophesying about the prophecy, the Torah. So we're going to go back to Haggai and see if there's any problem with lighting an 8-branched menorah at Chanukah. And let's think about the circumcision. When we think of circumcision, even if it falls on a Shabbat, we have to circumcise on the 8th day, because there's something about the 8th day that we're not allowed to forget. It's a remembrance of something. And in the physical realm, it's a taking away of the flesh. Right? And so the completion of 7 days is a necessary preparatory step before you can celebrate the 8th day or the circumcision. In other words, this child will have to celebrate at least one Shabbat before he can be circumcised. By analogy, is it possible that those from among the nations will have to observe one Shabbat before they can enter the 8th day? When the veil of flesh is taken out of the way, when the 7th millennium is complete, they have to live through that Shabbat, because as we see from Enoch, Chanuch, it's a time of education and training. He is the 7th generation from Adam. So in that 7th millennium, we are being trained, we are being disciplined, we are being educated. The ministry of education in Israel is Sar Chinuch. You hear Chanuk, Enoch, Chanukah. Same root. Because the 8th transcends the physical world. It has a hidden quality to it. We're aware of it, but we can't fully engage it before that completed preparation of the 7 days and Shabbat. So does it make sense now why the Jews were looking for something in the temple at winter, but it was hard for them to get that it was not yet time? The second part of the prophecy had to do with bringing back Israel from the nations at Sukkot, giving them a millennium of training, education, and preparation, so that together as one nation we could enter into that feast of dedication, when the veil of flesh is taken away and we will be resurrected in an even greater sense. Because there's still physicality and death in the millennium. You realize that? Even though the entropy is slowed way down, there is still death, because the adversary will be released at the end of 1,000 years. That's why we need education and training in the 7th millennium, so that as we are sealed up with that 7, that we can enter in to what is beyond. All right, again, the Hanukkah prayers mention 2 miracles, victory in war and the kindling of lights in the temple. Where is that? Remember, it was for thanks and praise. And we tend to get all bent out of shape because of the legend of the oil, right? That's where they'll tear you up on the internet. There is no proof. Where is it recorded that oil burned for 8 days, miraculously? Maybe that's not the point. Even Orthodox Jews will tell you that's just a legend, right? It's just an Agadah. What is the Agadah based on? Again, don't look to Reform or conservative Jews for anything. They're not helping you. A continuously burning flame celebrated at Hanukkah. What should that remind you of? The burning bush and Moses. Remember, he's the middle of the 7 shepherds. Because remember, everything streams out from there. Remember when he said, Moses, I want the people to believe in you forever. We tend to skip over that. Because in church they taught us it was all about Yeshua.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to understand Yeshua if you don't understand Moses? Because he said they have Moses and the prophets. If they didn't believe them, they're not going to believe me. They're going to believe one even resurrected from the dead. If you don't believe Moses, believe in Moses forever. You're still singing a song in Revelation. Exodus 3, 1 through 4. Moses brought who? the sheep, to the mountain of God. An angel appears from the midst of the bush, but neither the bush nor the angel is consumed by the fire. Hashem himself calls to Moses from the midst of the bush. So who is the angel? Yeshua. It was only when Hashem saw that Moses turned and observed how remarkable the miracle that he spoke to him. And Moses was the one who was able to lead out of tribulation, out of Mitzrayim. The root of that is tsar, which means tribulation. Put the plural on the end of it, put the mem on the front of it, and you have a word that means from the tribulations, or the means by which the tribulations are accomplished. That's Mitzrayim, and that's what Egypt means. Moses was the one who led all Israel, including a mixed multitude of people who were not native born. So, was this the same angel of the presence that protected Shadrach, Meshach, and the billy goat in the furnace? They're burning, but they're not burning up. When the cloven tongues of fire fell in Acts chapter 2, did they run around with their hair on fire? No. They were burning. They just weren't burning up. You are the light of the world. Why would you burn up? Moses asks why, but he uses a specific Hebrew word. He doesn't say lama. He says madua. Madua, when I say why, madua, I mean, why? What is the process? It's different than just saying, why did you do that? Give me a reason. Madua says, tell me the process of why this is happening. He asked, Madua, why is the bush not burning? What is the process? What happened in the past to make this happen? So in order to realize the bush is not being consumed, you would have to spend some time, wait, look at it, contemplate, meditate, ask questions. Why? Moses infers that the fire is not an earthly fire. It came about through a different process. The bush itself was not the fuel for the fire, just like the oil itself was not for the fuel for the menorah. Just like the warrior didn't bring the victory in the first mention, but it was Adonai himself who brought the victory in battle when they would return, when they would repent and dedicate the house. So Moses encounters the fire on the mountain of God on two journeys. The first with the sheep of his father-in-law, and a second time with the sheep of his father. He's that central fourth of the seven shepherds, and every one of those patriarchs represents a spiritual quality. Abraham represents love and kindness. When he comes up in your sukkah on the first night of Sukkot, he wants to know, have you been hospitable and kind to strangers? You know, there's places you go where you have to fill out a resume just to join the congregation the first time. I understand the caution. But what about Abraham? Isaac represents restraint and personal strength. Jacob represents beauty and truth. Moses represents eternality and dominance through the Torah, the fourth branch. Aaron represents empathy and receptivity to divine splendor. You can see the glory on Aaron. Do people see glory in our lives? After we've engaged the Torah, do we come away and our face is glowing, or we got a big old frown on our face? Didn't Aaron run in between the plague and the people? How many of us are willing to run between the plague and the people instead of run up on the mountain and hide? He didn't walk, he ran to stop the plague. We should be running to prayer and interceding for those who are lost. That's the spirit of Aaron. Joseph represents holiness and spiritual foundation. David represents the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth. And the eighth shepherd would have all those qualities. because he's hidden in the midst of the menorah. Moses' ability was seeing. He could see human suffering and he could see the divine. The war of Chanukah is joined by kindling of the lights in theme. And that's what the liturgy is about. It's about delivering the strong into the hands of the weak. It's about doing extraordinary things with ordinary people.
Yes.
You want to be an ordinary people so that he can do extraordinary things, so that people will know it's his victory, not yours. It's unworldly. It's not of this world. It's the power of Adonai. It's something that's seen in the world of miracles. That's what Chanukah is commemorating. You have to turn aside. You have to ask that question, Madua, what was the process? We have to be willing to alleviate human suffering. Moses was willing to do that. He was willing to acknowledge in that burning bush there was an intervention from on high in the physical realm, a realm of miracles. It's that fiery Torah, it comes down to us from heaven. We don't have to go up into heaven to find it. We don't have to go to the bottom of the sea. It's right here in your mouth. Isn't that not the root of dedication?
Yes.
Chanukah.
Sure.
It's your speech. It's right here. It should cause us to turn aside, ask a question, and consider the miraculous nature of what we are called to be. We should be burning lights with no rational explanation. You look at the conditions surrounding our lives, and we should be beaten down, bitter, given up. And what do? We flame higher.
That's right.
Because it's supernatural. It's not through the power of our own hands, it's through the power of his strong hand that we burn. And we burn.
Yes.
With no rational explanation, we continue burning. Again, they took that entire year. We've talked about that. I'd like to get on so you could see the first Chanukah. I'm skipping forward here a little bit for the sake of time. Is it possible that there's even more of a Sheni embedded in this? We find this in Yoma 69a in the Talmud, and it's the first Chanukah. And you only know about this if you're interested in whether the high priest can wear his priestly garments outside of the temple. Now, it sounds funny, but think of Yeshua. Remember, he had to go out and gather the nations. If he was the 8th shepherd, he had to go fetch them. He had to encounter the nations. In the first Chanukah, Alexander the Great had been persuaded by the Samaritans that the Jews were subversive, and he needed to deal with the Jews. Now remember, the Samaritans were the ones that would set the signal fires on the mountaintops to confuse the Jews so they wouldn't know what time of the month it was. Which, ladies, we're never confused, all right? But they would mess with their calendar signals. When the Sanhedrin would declare the first of the month, they would light signal fires to try to communicate, and the Samaritans would get up there and maliciously put fires on the wrong day and have them celebrating too early. So keep people off track. Next time someone hits you with the calendar controversy, think of that. But Alexander had been persuaded, I need to march on Jerusalem and I need to deal with these Jews. And so the high priest and the elders hear about it, and they say, what shall we do? And they prayed. And so the high priest puts on his priestly garments, and they take torches in their hands, and the elders begin marching toward Alexander. And in the story, those torches didn't go out all night. So what are they telling us? That these were great lights. These were shepherds. in the house of Israel. And they started marching toward the enemy to try to mediate what happened next. And so when Shimon HaTzadik was the priest at that time, he was a righteous priest. When Alexander sees the high priest, he bows down to the ground. And his men are saying, "What are you doing bowing down to this Jew?" And Alexander says, "I've seen this man in my dream. I know who this man is." And it was a great Chanukah. They were spared. And they were able to return the service of the temple after that encounter. But that was Yom HaGerizim, the Samaritans who worshiped there. Remember, they also celebrated Passover at Mount Gerizim. They were constantly trying to commandeer authority away from the Jews. That was their focus. So be careful of these Torah-only people.
Yep.
Be really careful. Because we've already seen how fallacious that is when you stop at Deuteronomy. And they've actually recently uncovered a mosaic in a synagogue. It's hard to see on there, but it appears to be that very scene. With Alexander the Great, some great Greek warrior, however he's dressed, and he's discussing there with 8 elders, the 8 torches, the 8 leaders of men. That was out of National Geographic, if I can read that right. So, there was a deliverance there from the Greeks the first time, but the second time they had to fight it out. About 130 years later, Antiochus Epiphanes and his Greek army, they overrun the temple. And based on the legend of that night, that has more to do with the lights not going out than anything that would have happened later during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. They probably just carried the story over and overlaid it. Has that ever happened with a holiday?
Yeah.
We take the older story and just keep adding. But like I say, even Orthodox Jews, they're not going to tell you that that's a truth. They're going to tell you that it's a story. It's an Agadah. And remember, it's about the clothes. The clothes of the Kohen Hagadol are going to be revealed to the nations. At the first Chanukah, the clothes of the high priest were revealed to the Greeks. What is that? That's a prophecy. Because Yeshua said, I still have work to do. I still have to reveal myself to the nations, to bring those nations and take them from the Assyrian who's overrun the land. And that's what it says in Hebrews. It says, seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. So we have that miraculous light that occurred before, which there was Thanksgiving at the first Chanukah, but there's also Thanksgiving at the second Chanukah. And if you look at the dates, remember the seed was Pesach and Pesach Sheni, 1 month later. If we look at Chanukah that's celebrated today, it's on the 25th of Kislev. If we look at Chanukah Sheni, the original one, so was it the original or is the second one the Sheni? Who knows? But you can see in it, the chiastic structure, it's 1 month prior. With Shavuot being in the middle. It's 25th of Tevet, the 25th of Kislev. A month different. And so almost humorously, I wrote, the hero of Chanukah is Judah HaMaccabee, or Yehuda the Hammer. And as Paul wrote to the Romans, It is the Jew who was given the temple services, and Judah was able to build or rebuild the sanctity of the house. In like manner, Yeshua the Jew is a builder, and he is rebuilding the Father's house. So we've looked at a lot of parallels. When we're looking at Sukkot, Maimonides taught from the tradition, and he's referring here to the 7 shepherds, the 7 Ushpizin. He says, they judge the heart of the Torah. While eating and drinking himself, one is obligated to feed the stranger, the orphan, the widow, along with the other unfortunate poor. One who does not is not enjoying a mitzvah, but rather his stomach. And that's a law, a rabbinic enactment. But it's based on the seed of the Torah that says we are to take care of the stranger, the alien, the orphan, and the widow at Sukkot. So if you want to prepare for Chanukah, what should be foremost and uppermost in your mind is how you are going to take care of the stranger, the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Because if you were to eat anything and enjoy any sort of festivity on Chanukah, without considering that primary factor, then all you're doing, he said, is feeding your stomach. But you're not feeding your spirit. And that sort of reflection has to take place before the 8th day. You've got till the end of the 7th day to figure that out. That Sukkot is not for you. Sukkot is for you to give to others. Remember, on the 8th day, we're not going to dwell in Sukkot. We're strangers and we're pilgrims. But we're looking for that permanent rest in Messiah. We're looking for a house that is built without human hands. So, the 7th, no, the 8th shepherd is Yeshua, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And this is what he says, for this reason they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple, in his house. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tabernacle over them. They will hunger no longer, nor thirst any more, nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and will guide them to springs of water of life, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. So, I can't tell you whether to celebrate Hanukkah. I can't tell you how to celebrate Hanukkah. All I can do is give you the scriptures. I can give you some of the historical context that you have to consider. But I tell you what, when I read that the Jews were asking him if he was the 8th shepherd, and he starts answering him and says, my sheep know my voice. It explained for me. Like I told Rabbi Cardozo, they're everywhere. They're not just in North America. They're in Central America. They're in South America. They're in Thailand. They're in Singapore. They're in China. They're in Egypt. They're in Pakistan. How do I know this? I get email too. They're everywhere.
Yes.
And that's why we have to prepare by majoring on the things that he majors on. No, Hanukkah is not a moed. There is no high Sabbath. There is no work proscription. But do you think you will be the lesser for remembering these themes? And I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a second Sukkot.
Yeah.
I'm ready for those springs of water. So I already showed you on your menorah. There's 7 there, but what's the hidden number? 8. It's hard to see with the natural eye, right?
Well, we got some things to chew on, huh? That was good. Thank you, Hollisa. Thank you for coming out.